always gotten my attention. Can you hear me now? Oh, now we're on. Stephen has always gotten my attention. Obviously, because it's my name. But actually, it's because only one person in my 50-plus years of existence who has ever called me by my full name. That would be my mother. She is the only one in 50-plus years who has ever called me Stephen. She always does to this day. She reminds me, well, that is the name I gave you. Stephen always gets my attention because, of course, it's only my mother who says it most. Actually, everybody else calls me Steve, and I'm fine with that. You don't have to change your ways. You can still call me Steve. After all, one consonant is easier than two, right? So after all, stick with Steve. But Stephen has always gotten my attention because it comes from my mother. Now, what really gets my attention is when I hear Stephen John. That too has only been spoken by my mother. And it has been spoken often. And usually, when it is spoken, it's because my mother wants my attention. Usually, because I've done something I wasn't supposed to when I was younger. And now that I'm older, and even when I was younger, it's usually stated when I'm not doing something I'm supposed to be doing. And so I will hear Stephen John. And my ears perk up, and why, she has my undivided attention. Usually, again, she would say that two names together when I was growing up because, of course, I was ignoring her. She wanted me to get something done, and I didn't want to do it. So the best thing to do was ignore Mom, thinking that maybe she'll just forget that I'm here. It never worked. She would then say, Stephen John, and of course then she would tell me what needed to be done. Go feed the chickens, go outside, get the cows milked, whatever it was. And of course I kept thinking, Mom, if you really loved me, you wouldn't make me do these things. Have you ever thought that as a child? Come on. So we all have. It's like if our parents really loved us, they wouldn't make us do these things. And yet the older we get, the more we realize it's because they love us that they make us do those things. And so, of course, my mother would tell me what needed to be done, and I would come back at her and say, well, what do I got to do that for? And then I would get the look. And she would remind me, you're doing it for the family. Stephen John, Martha, Martha. Jesus has to say the name not once, but twice. Martha, Martha. Martha was so busy that Jesus had to say her name twice just to get her attention, no doubt, because, of course, Martha was busy. Now, you and I today, we can relate to Martha because we are Martha. That's who we are in today's gospel. But if the truth be told, we all want to be Mary. We all want to be the guest. We all want to be able to sit down for a moment and do nothing. Nothing but to simply listen. Because Jesus tells us in the gospel today that Mary did the one thing that is necessary. What did Mary do? Well, the one thing that was necessary that she did was she acknowledged, she discovered the presence of Christ in her midst. And because of that, she listened. You You see, the danger, my friends, with today's gospel is for you and I to leave the church to think that somehow it's an either-or proposition. We either have to be Martha or we have to be Mary. Wrong. It's not an either-or thing. Jesus wants you and I to be a both and. Both Martha and Mary. We have to do both because on this side of heaven where you and I currently live and move and have our being, there are chores that need to be done. There is work that needs to be accomplished. There are people who need to be served. There is a family that needs to be cared for. There is work and chores and hospitality to be done. Well, what do I have to do that for? Might be the question that you and I oftentimes might ask ourselves as we're busy doing what we are doing. But it's not a matter of what is it we have to do that for, but it's a change of mindset. Because for Mary, and what Jesus wants Martha to understand, it's not about what am I doing it for, but who am I being with. It's a big difference, isn't it? Doing for, being with. It's why my mother would always say to me, when I would ask her the question, what do I have to do that for? Her answer was always what? The family. It's about being with the family. It's about being with the presence of Christ in our midst. And once we can see that, and discover that, and welcome that, and be in the presence of that reality, why then all the busyness that we do, all the work that we need to accomplish, all the sweat and tears that we shed, why, it's done out of what? Out of love. Out of love for the presence of Jesus Christ, who is in our midst, in the spouse that we care for, in the children that we raise and that we love, in the chores that need to be done for the people around us, in the work that we need to do. Why, in all of that, it's not about doing for, but it's about being with. Being with this community to the best of our ability. And when we do that, then we no longer worry about being acknowledged for the work that we're doing. We no longer worry about being recognized for all that we're accomplishing. We're no longer worried about what it is that we're doing and what it is that others aren't doing. No. Once we change our focus to being with the presence of Christ in our midst, that is found in the stranger, in the neighbor, in the family member, in the friend. Once we discover and welcome that, why then God will have our attention, and He will say our names, and we will respond, "Here I am."